Hi, I'm Jeff. This is Tropical Plants at 53 degrees north. Now, 3 weeks ago, I made a video called A Weird Thing About Tradescantia Tricolor Propagation. And in that video, I showed you some new plants that arose from some cuttings I took from Tradescantia Tricolor. And it was very strange indeed. I thought it was pretty weird anyway. And at the end of that video, we talked about what we could possibly do as another experiment from that new plant. So let's have a look at that new plant now and see what actually happened when I tried the experiment. Let's jump in. And we are in. Okay, so I've got a number of experiments running at the moment in the greenhouse, all of which will become revealed in the fullness of time. That's the phrase, isn't it? So we're looking at my Tradescantia Tricolor here. This is the Tricolor Minima. There's not many of the green shoots on it and like the fully pink cream shoots on it. I don't remember anyway. I do pull them off because what I'm after are the variegated leaves. These are the kind of leaves that I want. Now, I've had a really humid week, and the result of that is, can you see where we're getting these kind of darkened edges and black edges to the leaves? That just comes from a little bit of a lack of ventilation. It's actually out of the line of the fan at the moment, so they just need pulling off when I get round to it. So this was the original plant, and I thought, right, well, what we'll do is we will propagate some of the different variegations, and I stuck them all in the same pot, the variegated ones, and I also took some of the fully green ones and put them in a pot as well. And as we saw from the last video, this is what actually happened. So first of all, the less exciting result was that we ended up with like a fully green version. So that's that one. And there's another one down there, a fully green version of Tradescantia Tricolor, which might be something that you want. It's not spectacular, I realise, but it's still quite a nice plant. I don't mind it. They do get very shiny, glossy, velvety kind of leaves. But the main result was this one, and this was the really surprising one. So this was cuttings from the Tradescantia Tricolor, all different variegations popped in there, and this is what we ended up with. So this is not just one plant, this is many plants. Now, perhaps the best way to demonstrate this is to put them together and point out that they are completely different. The one on the right is much bigger leaved, even though they're in a similar position. The leaves are much bigger. It's even though the one on the left is a couple of years old, the one on the right is much younger, and it's a lot more vigorous. Initially, when I showed this on the video 3 weeks ago, those pinky cream leaves on the right were a lot whiter, whereas the ones on the left were a lot pinker. But as you can see, as time's gone on, they're kind of morphing into the same colour, I think. I think they're a similar colour, even though I think the one on the right is still much bigger in the leaf. But it is a different plant. So at the end of that, we come up with a couple of things. One, we said, well, how can this happen? How come the Tradescantia Tricolor keeps trying to revert back to green? Where does it actually come from if that's the case? How can you get a Tradescantia Tricolor if you can't do it from seed, if you can't do it from cuttings? How do you get it in the first place, which I'm going to try and answer today. But the main part of the video is what would happen if I took different variegations, so different gradings of variegations from the plant that you're looking at now. So perhaps I took some of the fully pink stroke cream leaves, I took some that were just a little bit variegated, like that one, and I kind of graded them and moved on up to the ones that are fully green. What would actually happen to those cuttings? Would they all revert to green eventually? Would there be any mileage in doing it? Would it be worth it? So we're going to have a look at the results right now. And just for 30 seconds before we do that, I thought we'd just quickly discuss where does this come from if you can't get it from traditional methods. Well, as was raised in the comments, one of the common ways to actually propagate things that do not come true from seeds, from propagations, is to use this technique called Mericloning. It's used a lot in the orchid world, and basically what they do, and this is a very specialised procedure, it's not something that everybody can do, you need a lab to do it. Basically what they do is they take some of these special cells from the tips of the shoots, and they're able to actually replicate this plant as what we would traditionally think of as a clone, so that it is absolutely identical in every way. And that's what they do with orchids. This is what they do with plants that have some kind of mutation on them, and they know that if they take some of traditional vegetative cuttings, it won't come true. It's not going to give you the exact same plant with all these different variations. So I suspect that Tradescantia Tricolor is one such plant, that it's actually Mericloned, and it's done in a lab, and then they can produce hundreds of thousands of these plants very, very cheaply and very swiftly. And that leaves us with these lovely plants, but it does mean that we can't get that back unless we buy a new one. Eventually, what's going to happen to that is that the green leaves take over, it reverts to green. If you take the green ones out and just leave these, because for some reason these creamy pink ones also take over the plant if you leave them, but as we found out through one or two experiments, they will not survive on their own. They will kill the plant. If you leave those on, they will gradually, over time, weaken the plant, and eventually it will die. So that's where they come from. That answers that question. So let's have a look at our results from actually propagating the new plant, in inverted commas, over here, to see what happened when I took the various variegations, graded them, planted them separately. Let's see what the results of that was. Okay, so as you can see from down here, I've got all sorts of experiments going on here. I'm testing some capillary matting, see if that works, see if that cuts down on my current time taken. On average is about 90 minutes to water everything in this greenhouse, and I really want to get that time back, so I'm experimenting with that. But here what we have, so let's just explain this. So that's pot 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I started off, and you can see this is an empty pot. I started off with just purely pink and cream leaves, nothing else, no green on them whatsoever, and then I tried to grade them as we went along. So this one had a little bit more green, but the minimum amount of green. That one had a bit more. Then over to here, which was like your half two-tone, a little bit more still, mostly green, and then this one was supposedly almost all green. I didn't take one with just green because I know what happens to that. Then you end up with a plant that's just green. So this has been a couple of weeks, maybe even 3 weeks. So the first result is, obviously, I've tried this over and over again. If you take cuttings from just the purely pink and cream leaves, you will get nothing. It will perish. And you can even see from this one, can you see that one there that's like nearly dead? There's a tiny sliver of green, and that's just about kept it alive, but hardly. I even ended up taking another one similar, and that one's just about managed. There's a little bit more green on it. It does look like it will survive, but it's not growing at great speed like some of the others. So I'll move along. This one's doing particularly well, but what we can see from this one is that the younger stems seem to have a little bit more green on them. So I would suspect, and it's probably not long enough yet to tell, but I would suspect that over time that too will turn fully green. Moving along, this was my favourite. I really like this two-tone effect. But you can see on the same shoot, so it's like the same main stem, there's a little offshoot coming. What have we got? Almost pure green leaves, so that too is reverting. And I'll cut that off, and eventually when this stem gets long enough, I'll take a cutting from that and pop it in and see if we can get a plant that is fully two-toned. That will be really interesting. And then moving along, even more green on this, less variegation, but again you can see there's a new shoot coming there that's practically all green, so that too is reverting. And then over to this one, which was almost all green. Now this has done something really strange in that this has sent a new shoot up, which is again moving towards the pink stroke cream. So basically what we've got here, I think, as far as my thoughts go on this, and again, it's not really been left long enough to come up with a full-on conclusion, but my first thoughts, we call them pre-conclusions, is that this will do exactly the same as what happened when I took cuttings from the original Tradescantia Tricolor. In other words, it will produce plants that look like this with all these different variegations, And I think that is as different a plant as we're ever going to get. We're not going to get anything different to that. Like we said, we started with that and we got something that had some pretty different characteristics on here. But I think that is it now as far as it goes. I think it's worth taking cuttings because I think in the short term you can get some nice plants with various amounts of variegations on them. So for instance, this one, if you keep pinching that out to a certain degree, you can now come up with a plant that is mostly like that, mostly that amount or that gradient of variegation on it. But these things are short-lived. Whatever you actually do, and I could do the same with that one, I could probably end up with a plant two-tone, but again, it's short-lived. It will still want to go back to fully green or fully pink and cream, and in which case, as we've said already, if you leave it fully pink and cream, it will weaken it and weaken it and weaken it until eventually it dies. So that's my thoughts so far. I might be proved wrong, I don't know, I'm sure somebody else has done this to see what happens. So yeah, it's worth taking cuttings from both plants just to have an experiment with them, but I don't think you're ever going to get like a full-on plant just like that unless you keep trying to pinch any out that are different. But I think eventually you'll get to the point where it just will not produce those anymore. It will just produce either pink and cream or fully green, or it might even produce some of these like this. But you're not really going to get much out of it, I don't think. I don't think you're going to get like completely different plants that don't need anything doing to them. So it's interesting to have a go at these things and see what happens. It's also interesting to learn a bit about the Mericloning and where these things come from in the first place. So if nobody's done this and they want to give it a go, it's certainly worth a try. It does give you some really interesting results. It's not, in my experience anyway, like taking cuttings from other plants where you pretty much end up with the exact same thing. I think this is what makes these plants so interesting. There are so many different types, so many different varieties, and I've recently purchased some more Tradescantia and some more from the Commelinaceae. That takes a bit of practice to say that, from the Commelinaceae family, because I've found that unlike other plant families, they're all very, very similar. Like, for example, an apple tree and a rose come from the same family, but they're completely different, aren't they? Different characteristics, whereas a lot from the Commelinaceae family look very, very similar in as much as they have similar characteristics. They're very easy to propagate, they all root as they go, and so on and so forth. So it's going to be quite interesting to learn about these things and learn a little bit more as time goes on. So anyway, that's the video for today. I hope you enjoyed that, and please put in the comments any experiences you've had with propagating Tradescantia, and if you've come up with any unusual results like this. Have you managed to make any new plants that look completely different from the parent plant? I want to hear about it. Put it in the comments down below, and if you enjoyed this video or got any value from it at all, please give me a thumbs up. It all helps the channel to grow, and for now, I'll see you on the next one. Bye.